You're watching Force 13's live streaming service.
Alright, welcome to the stream that we are doing on the latest on Hurricane Elsa. We're gonna get some imagery real quick. Sorry we are late. I hoped to begin this 10 minutes earlier, but of course things happen, and now we are, of course, tracking the latest. This is replacing that tropical weather bulletin that we had hoped to get, but unfortunately difficulties prevented from doing so. But regardless, here we are. I'm joined by Isaac, Ethan, Alfiria, Devin, Kay, Leahy, Nelson, Rishi, Ryan S., and Mike. So a large team with us tonight covering the latest on a very significant system, especially for this early time of month.
You bet. I mean, it's been a system of this magnitude, even come close to the intensity that Elsa is at this point in time and at this point of year for the Atlantic Basin. And current thinking right now is that this could potentially be a red flag for what could be an active season, another active season, on the heels of a hyperactive season last year, 2020. So, but right now we have a dangerous hurricane on the way towards Cuba, Jamaica, Hispaniola. They're going to be getting all affected by this hurricane. I hope everybody's taking the time to prepare for this. This storm is booking it at 30 miles an hour, so your time is running low here. So please, if you're in the path of this, if you're in Cuba, Hispaniola, Jamaica, you're under those warnings, please take the necessary precautions ahead of time from this system and don't wait till it's right on top of you.
Indeed. Now, Ethan has the imagery pulled up on Elsa here. What are you seeing with this system, and how has it progressed throughout today?
From our stream last night, Elsa was way over here to the east of the Windward Islands, I think as a 50-mile-per-hour tropical storm, and surprisingly, very surprisingly, over the course of this morning, I think around just before 8 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, the storm generated sustained winds on Barbados that were supportive of a hurricane. So the National Hurricane Center did upgrade it to a hurricane at that time, which was very surprising, and really reminds me of Isaias from last year, how these storms can all of a sudden just pull surprises on us. And right now, the storm, it's got an interesting appearance to it. I'm not sure if the center is completely has convection over it or not, but either way, it does appear that right now there is this massive eastern blob on the eastern side of the circulation, and this storm right now doesn't even have a fully complete eye wall as of right now. So it appears to be undergoing some sort of restructuring phase as of right now, whether that's due to dry air or wind shear. I'm not entirely sure on that, but if I had to guess right now, for my best guess for this storm is we might see some very slight weakening. Right now, our analysis is down to 80 miles per hour. So is the ATCF, National Hurricane Center, will probably follow that estimate at 11 p.m. But maybe some slight weakening down to 75 miles per hour over the next few hours. But I think once this gets closer to the Dominican Republic and Haiti, and passes in between Haiti and Jamaica, we're going to see some significant intensification on the system, and potentially reaching a peak density near Category 2 or Category 3. That's just my current thoughts on this right now.
Can you get the National Hurricane Center stuff screened over here?
Sure thing. I'm actually gonna pull up our forecast cone real quick that we just released 22 minutes ago. Let me just pull that up here real quick. There is that cone being shown in your screen shortly. There it is. So as I said, we are running right now with winds of 80 miles per hour, and we are now forecasting a peak of 105 miles per hour. This is up from our last cone this morning, where we ran with an initial intensity of 75 miles per hour and forecasted a Category 2 minimal. At that cone, we have uptaked this cone a little bit because we've just gotten more higher confidence, and this just reinstates my current thinking The National Hurricane Center actually think that this will have a very close pass / landfall on the southwestern tip of Haiti here, but most models I'm seeing are actually farther off towards the southwest, and do significantly shrink the storm as it passes through the strait. So perhaps minimal end direction will take place, leading to perhaps a higher peak intensity. Anyway,
One
go
of the
ahead.
things that should be noted here with the cone, especially with a storm like this, is that we definitely should not be taking these intensities specifically at face value. The NHC does go a little bit lower than this, mainly because of just how uncertain the strength of the storm can be. What we do know is that the HWRF, which initialized perfectly, which is exactly what you want to see for systems like this, it initialized pretty much perfectly, and it takes the storm into the straits between Jamaica, Haiti, and Cuba, and intensifies the storm rather rapidly through there, jumps it up a category. So we'll
2
have to
categories,
see
actually.
2 categories. Well, there you. Oh yeah, that's right. It jumped it up to the Cat 4 in the last run, which is kind of crazy. I don't know if it'll get that high, but
No.
it approaches Hispaniola as a borderline Cat 1, Cat 2, and then it just blows up there in the straits. Now that's if it gets into the straits. Now if it gets sucked into Hispaniola, obviously the system's going to be far weaker, and the system will do something completely different. We've already talked in length yesterday about how much of a wild card Hispaniola is going to be. That's still the case, even with the storm that's at hurricane intensity. This is still a very small storm. Tropical storm force winds aren't extending too far more than 100 miles away from the center of the storm. Not really much further than that, and most of the tropical storm force winds are induced because of the insane forward speed of this storm. So that's likely inflated a little bit just because it's moving at almost tropical storm force speed. But when you go ahead and take a look at this, yeah, there is a lot of uncertainty when it comes to forecasting the intensity of this, and definitely don't take this at face value. When we're talking about forecasts in a category 2 in 1.5, 2 days, there's an error margin on that, and it's the same error margin as the National Hurricane Center. It's an error margin, believe it or not, of 20 knots. So that can go up 20 miles an hour. That could go down 20 miles an hour. So you see 105. That could mean as high as 125 at all. It could mean as low as 85. So intensity forecasting is very, very, very difficult, and you shouldn't be taking those at face value. What you should be doing is just preparing for, hey, there's going to be some significant hurricane impacts here. I would say that any sort of preparations need to be rushed to completion in the Dominican Republic and Haiti and Jamaica, because your time's certainly running out with this system very quickly approaching at over 25, 30 miles an hour. Crazy. Those preparations need to be rushed to completion. There's going to be a hurricane knocking on your doorstep. Storm surge impacts probably won't be too significant. The most significant impact is absolutely going to be from the rainfall. We're looking at localized 15 to 20 inches of rain in both Hispaniola and Cuba. So we'll have to, hopefully those don't happen, but it is possible. The National Hurricane Center has noted that themselves, that, localized 15 plus inches possible. So keep an eye on that. That's factored into the CDPS rating of this system, which right now it's a 5, which is pretty destructive to say the least. Like that puts it in the top that puts it roughly in the top 70% of storms that have all made landfalls since 1988 in the Atlantic. So this could definitely be a very destructive system as it moves through the Caribbean, and people should be taking this storm very seriously as it moves through Hispaniola, Jamaica, and Cuba.
So Devin, is that stage 5 CDPS rating? Is that for Haiti or is that for Eastern Cuba by chance?
Both of them.
Oh, so
Both.
which of those values? I know that you have this point system that you apply to it.
Yes.
I'm assuming that the Haiti landfall is higher up on the point scale.
The Haiti landfall is higher up just because,
With the
I mean,
rainfall.
actually, it more has to do with the wind speed because we have the wind speed higher approaching Haiti than it does Cuba. But if it doesn't hit Haiti, then it can be even stronger if it hits Cuba. So
I
it's
see.
it's kind of a wonky streak right now. So the Cuba landfall is currently counted at 5 knots lower than the Haiti landfall. That could potentially happen. Landfall is going to happen on one of the Greater Antilles. We just don't know where yet. At least one of them. And basically, what we've got going on here is a storm that's it's set to cause. We're talking widespread flash flooding, mudslides. Absolutely a big concern. With the storm quickly intensifying while moving as fast as it is, definitely caught a lot of us off guard. The southwestern quadrant is still trash in the storm, by the way. There's barely any tropical storm force winds there, if at all. And that mainly has to do with the forward speed of the storm. This storm's expected to be pretty damaging, but mainly actually because of the rainfall that it's expected to produce over Cuba and Hispaniola. As far as effects on the United States, it's too far out to really pin down what's going to happen. It looks pretty certain that some impacts are going to happen in Florida. So if you're in Florida, pay close attention to this storm, no matter where you are on the coast. Just pay close attention to the storm. I know the governor was considering a state of emergency earlier today. I don't know if he's gone through with that at this point or not,
No.
but he has not. Okay, so there you go. But Florida, the governor is at least considering a state of emergency already with this storm, and I imagine he probably will declare once it seems more certain that the storm will actually impact Florida. But it's looking pretty good for some impacts to be felt in Florida, but it's 4 or 5 days out. Really difficult to pin down what kind of impacts will happen.
So with those Florida impacts growing more and more certain, I'm assuming that you've applied a CDPS rating to Florida as well?
No, because it's too far out. The cone
Oh, okay.
when I went ahead and did the CDPS update, and that would have been 3 hours ago when the National Hurricane Center released their new cone. The 3-day cone actually just stopped short of the Florida Keys, so Florida did not qualify to be given a CDPS rating yet because it's too far out.
I just wanted to go through the warnings and watches, given the fact that
Okay,
there is
go
a
ahead.
multitude of them.
There's a lot.
Yeah. Hopefully I do pronounce these right, because of course we're looking at the Caribbean here. So, there is a hurricane warning in effect for the southern coast of the Dominican Republic from Punta Palenque to the border with Haiti. There's also a hurricane warning for the southern portion of Haiti from Port-au-Prince to the southern border with the Dominican Republic. And there's also a hurricane warning for the entire island of Jamaica. There is a tropical storm warning, which means that tropical storm force winds are expected within the next the next day or so. It's very for sure. That is for the St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Lucia, Martinique, the coast of Haiti, north of Port-au-Prince, and the south coast of the Dominican Republic, east of Punta Palenque to Cabo Engano. There is a hurricane watch that is in effect for the Cuban provinces of Camagüey, Granma, Guantanamo, Holguin, Las Tunas, and Santiago de Cuba. There is a tropical storm watch that is in effect for Grenada and its dependencies, Saba and St. Eustis, north coast of the Dominican Republic from Cabo Engano to Bahia de Manzanillo, and Cayman Brac and Little Cayman. Just to get an idea of what these warnings mean, if you are in that hurricane warning that I mentioned, that means hurricane conditions are expected somewhere within the warning area. Preparations to protect life and property should be rushed to completion, which pretty much means ASAP if you haven't already. A tropical storm warning means that tropical storm conditions are expected somewhere within the warning area. Again, if you have not made preparations and you are under a tropical storm warning, you should be having them finished within the next 12 hours tops, unless you're already in it, like St. Lucia and the St. Vincent have been dealing with. So please make sure that all your preparations are completed. A tropical storm watch and hurricane watch really means that those conditions are expected respectively, and they are usually issued 48 hours or so before the storm strikes. That way you get some preparation to get ready for the system. And of course, we are looking at a really fast storm. It is moving at a very quick 30 miles an hour, one of the fastest storms I have seen cross the Caribbean in the several years I've been tracking cyclones. So definitely not something to take down lightly. This did, of course, strengthen much quicker than the National Hurricane Center did initially expect it to. So please do not let the cone or the forecast or the track let you off guard. You really need to be watching this, because if there's one thing about this hurricane season, it's all about pulling surprises, and this is another one, of course, and I really can't stress enough the importance of making sure you have your plan ready and ready to go, because, I mean, when you're looking at a hurricane looking at 30 miles an hour, that gives you little time to prepare, especially when you have a lot of land masses in the path, and of course when you're trying to get information for your specific area, it becomes a lot much more difficult, because you have a lot more areas that need their attention as well. In terms of getting into the little specifics that the National Hurricane Center has highlighted, they're looking at storm surge above as 4 to 6 feet for the southern coast of Cuba, 2 to 4 feet for the southern coast of Hispaniola, and 1 to 3 feet storm surge for Jamaica. In terms of rainfall, it's expected to produce rainfall totals of 4 to 8 inches, with maximum up to 15 across the Windward and the southern Leeward Islands. This includes Barbados, which has already seen hurricane force winds with this. We're also looking at the fact that this will lead to isolated flash flooding as well as mudslides, although rainfall should be decreasing for you guys by tomorrow morning. In terms of Puerto Rico, 1 to 3 inches with localized amounts of 5 inches expected tonight and Saturday. This could lead to isolated flash flooding and minor river flooding, along with the potential for mudslides, I should say. For Hispaniola and Jamaica, we're looking at 4 to 8 inches with isolated maximum amounts of 15 inches possible. Of course, you could also see a little bit more than that as well. Depends on where those bands do set up, because of course we are still looking at a little bit of an uncertain path with this. And of course this rain may lead to scattered flash flooding and mudslides. And then of course once we get into the Cayman Islands and Cuba, they're calling for 5 to 10 inches of rain, and we could be seeing 15 inches of rain with that as well, and of course that will lead to significant flash flooding and mudslides. Of course, we're way too far out to determine rainfall impacts as we get into the U.S., because as we all know, the National Hurricane Center has now placed Florida, far southeastern Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina in that cone. So it's way too early to determine how much rainfall, how much of the wind impacts we're seeing there. Of course, we have been dealing with a shifting cone all throughout the day, whether it's been shifting east or shifting west. This remains very uncertain, with the spread remaining extremely far out. So definitely something that you need to be taking in mind. This is not going to be something that's going to be that very easy to predict the track or the intensity of, due to the land interaction, as well as the fact that this is a storm of surprises.
Exactly. So it's best to be prepared ahead of time, especially for this storm. As you and others have mentioned, this is booking it west northwest at 30 miles per hour, and I've been tracking since, oh gosh, since 2008, and I haven't seen a storm move this fast in the Caribbean. I don't even know, period, if there was one to move this fast in the Caribbean before. So quite a fast mover. It's expected to slow down slightly here as it nears Hispaniola and Jamaica. And of course, you see Jamaica and parts of Hispaniola are under a hurricane warning due to this. And just anybody really in the path of this storm in the forecast cone here from the National Hurricane Center needs to be taking this seriously here. Of course, the intensity forecast is still kind of up in the air. But we'll still get a better grip on it as the hours progress here with time, and we'll see if if Elsa gets better organized, if it stays around the same state that it is right now. We'll get a better estimate on intensity when that happens. But again, please, who haven't done so already, prepare ahead of time for the system. Or if you know anybody that's in the path of this forecast cone, make them aware of this storm and tell them to prepare ahead of time, because like I said, this is booking it at 30 miles an hour.
Yeah, and this is very abnormally fast for a tropical system going through the Caribbean. Like, you think of fast-moving systems when they enter the Caribbean. Storms like Hurricane Emily of 2005 immediately come to mind. Hurricane Matthew, while it was still developing, was moving at a pretty decent clip. This storm's a lot faster than both of them. So, yeah, this storm is definitely moving abnormally quickly. And usually what happens when you see a storm move so fast is that it's moving so fast to the point where it's actually starting to shear itself, the relative motion against the atmosphere of the storm is actually trying to tear it apart. So that's why you usually see storms that move this quickly just kind of poof away. That's obviously not happened here. This storm is here to stay and is expected to strengthen as it starts to slow down a little bit. The ridge to the north will be pushing up and off to the north and east. So that should weaken the steering currents down a little bit, allow this storm to just slow down and take a breath, which is not a good thing.
Yeah, I know. I guess while we're at it, we could be talking about models here. I know the A-Swarf, since it's gotten reconnaissance data, is still adamant on it being a major hurricane
Yes.
near Cuba and Jamaica right now, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's very adamant about it being a major hurricane. Basically, what it's doing is it's taking it right into the strait between Haiti, Jamaica, and Cuba. And go ahead and take a look at a lot of different Atlantic hurricanes that have gone through that strait. And they have actually used the convergence of all of those islands together to very rapidly consolidate and get together. Hurricane Dennis of 2005 immediately comes to mind, which is definitely an analog of this storm. This system could very easily do something very similar to Dennis, where it just really quickly gathers intensity in that strait, possibly weakens a little bit, and then maybe strengthens again going in towards Cuba. We'll have to find out what ends up happening with the storm, but yeah, that's something that we have seen before, even at this early time of year. It's something that we have observed. So it's something that, yeah, cannot be ruled out.
Alright, so I've just pulled up Ryan S's stream, and that's pretty much an idea of the large spread on Elsa here. And it looks like the GES ensemble is initializing way too weak. They're only initializing with a pressure of 1001 millibars. And I can tell you right now, it's definitely not 1001 millibars, so unfortunately, you really can't make any intensity-based anything with this ensemble that we got here. But it looks like the general consensus that they're starting to pick up on is that we could be seeing a Florida landfall. And then it looks like they start to a lot more condensed than yesterday. But they do take it up and put it inland with the remnant pretty much going into the mid-Atlantic and before going off past into New England and Nova Scotia. So that is a possible scenario that we could be looking at. Of course, you have some models that pretty much take the turn earlier and have it really going, staying out to sea, which we would hope. And then you have some that just decide to take it westward and then plow into New Orleans or parts of Mississippi and Alabama. So
what I want to go ahead and what I want to go ahead and note here really quick is that you'll see all of these rather weak looking systems here that go off to the east, with the exception of one of these, which looks like it turns into a rather large storm over the Gulf Stream. But if you go ahead and take a look at these eastern storms, there's pretty good model convergence for the first 24 hours, and we get to Hispaniola, and you could clearly see there is a split in the models right there at Hispaniola, where you get, I would say, a majority of them go off to the north and west, where it goes off into the strait, but a not insignificant amount of them take the storm directly over Haiti, weaken the storm considerably, and then move over the Bahamas, where it proceeds to do uh, a die, which would be a pretty good thing to see. That would spare Florida from any impacts. Unfortunately, it would probably be devastating in Haiti because of the rainfall that would produce. But it would at least be a good thing for U.S. impacts. The rest of these runs, though, as you could see, they take the storm pretty far west towards Cuba, and they're pretty much set. Whatever gets taken west here into Cuba without impacting Hispaniola, that's pretty much an indication that this is going to enter the Gulf of Mexico, provide impacts to western Cuba, and quite possibly the Gulf Coast, specifically anything to the east of 90 degrees to the east of New Orleans. So there's a very clear split in the models. We don't necessarily know what's going to happen yet. We'll find out, obviously, once this storm gets closer to Hispaniola. the large mountains there really tend to do crazy stuff with tropical cyclones when they get there. But yeah, you can very clearly see the divergence in the models right there as you get to Hispaniola.
Yeah, and looking at those model runs, especially the majority of them that try to put this to the west, I'm sorry,
Yep.
of Florida, most of them have it going through central into parts of northeastern Georgia into the Carolinas, and so if that were to happen, it would be a threat there as well.
Yeah, there would definitely be an inland flooding threat there. Too far out to really tell what those effects would be, obviously. But yeah, there's definitely an inland flooding threat there. I'm not quite sure what that is showing.
It seems that no, Ryan, no, pull up the initial models, like the first one,
Okay.
because it seems like the GPS ensembles is just not working apparently. So,
That happens.
yeah, Ryan, go back to the page, the global hurricane models, that one.
Yep. Pull up this one.
Now-
And now this will tell us what the differences are between actual different models. And you can see here yet again, you have the models that want a landfall in Hispaniola, and that's going to take it to the east of the United States. Everything else goes to the west and takes it into the Gulf of Mexico. So there you go. I mean, that pretty much lays it on thick right there, that it's basically going to be a game of what is this going to do with Hispaniola, and it still is.
Yep, the next 24 to 36 hours are really going to be pivotal
Huge.
to figure out where this is going to go, because we are looking at two distinct scenarios depending on what happens. If it takes that western route, then we've got a significant issue for parts of Florida as well as the southeast in terms of rainfall and wind for sure, especially when you get near the landfall area. Now, if it takes the eastern route and it hugs the coast like some of the models do, then we're looking at a more widespread issue, given the fact you're going to have southeast Florida in there. You're going to have the Carolinas and even the Mid-Atlantic in there. So that's really going to be something that we're going to have to watch over the next few days, especially considering the fact that you have the IVCN and then you have what appears to be the HMOD model that pretty much slams it right into the North Carolina area. And given the fact that it's still going north, it's not going to be a sharp turn away. So...
and the IVCN, that is a consensus model. Like, that's something that goes ahead and takes a look at model data from a bunch of other models and kind of conglomerates it into one output. So since that's a consensus model, you can put a pretty good weight on the IVCN more often than not. And the fact that that's taken it to the east of Florida now, for the most part, I think is pretty telling. But again, it does seem like that this storm has followed the eastern part of the cone thus far. That mainly has to do with the fact the storm has intensified more than we previously expected it to. We will see what ends up happening here, but yeah, it just seems like if it makes that landfall in Hispaniola, it's gonna throw the storm east.
And that obviously would be, I mean, the more ideal of the situations. I mean, we obviously we do not appreciate it when storms make landfall anywhere, but hopefully by mitigating the actual amount of geographical locations that take the storm head on,
Yep.
that will hopefully mitigate some of the impacts, because
And
obviously, Haiti, Cuba, and the Bahamas, yes, they're still populated, but I don't believe they're as densely populated as the state of Florida. Do correct me if I'm wrong, though.
oh no, the population in Florida is extremely dense in certain areas.
Panhandle, it is
There's
not
also-
very dense.
But yeah, there's also certain areas like the Big Bend coast of Florida. There nobody lives there. And the very southwestern corner of the state, that's the Everglades, no one lives there either. So it's really a 50-50 really of where the storm decides to come on shore in Florida. There's parts of the panhandle that are really populated, there's parts of the panhandle that are not populated at all. And then you've got the western coast where you've got like Tampa Bay, Naples, two really big cities right there, two really big metropolitan areas. But if you go further south from Naples, you run into the Everglades. There's nothing there. The entire east coast of Florida is pretty densely populated, though I don't think there's really much of a gap in the population there. But the western coast of Florida is definitely hit or miss when it comes to population density.
Yeah, it's like I'm just hoping that the overall number of people affected by the
People
storm is
affected.
minimized.
Yes.
I mean, obviously,
And if it
structure
tracks
wise,
over Florida, then you gotta figure there's gonna be all these people in Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, and the places further north that's gonna also be affected by the storm. So
exactly.
Yeah, the track that this is going to take, it determines whether people are going to be seeing remnants towards the southeast and mid-Atlantic, or whether we're going to be seeing a full-fledged tropical system. So a lot is in play, and we should finally get a better idea once we figure out what happens as Elsa tracks over to the west of Hispaniola. Now, looking at the path of this, another thing that has me really concerned is the fact that if tropical storm watches do get issued during the weekend, what really has me concerned, at least for Florida, is the fact that, as we all know, Sunday is the 4th of July Independence Day in the United States, and of course we usually aren't really paying attention to much on that day. We're usually trying to celebrate with the barbecues and the fireworks and all that stuff. So what I'm really concerned about is the fact that you're probably not going to be seeing too much attention on Elsa, and there's probably going to be too much focus on the 4th of July celebrations instead. So I'm really hoping that those in Florida are monitoring the situation. If you have any family in Florida, please let them know of the potential impacts this could bring, because it is looking more likely that somewhere in Florida, we just don't know where it's going to get the worst impacts, but somewhere in Florida we could be seeing some pretty significant impacts in towards the beginning of next week, towards Monday through Wednesday. So just please let your friends, family, anywhere you know down there, especially as we head into this holiday weekend, it's really pivotal that they get this information.
On a similar note about Florida, I've seen a couple people today mention this, and that is in regards to Surfside and that condo building. That is also a big concern when this thing moves through Florida, if and when it does, due to the additional storm surge and rain that will come with it to the exposed building. And I know that seems really off topic, but it is something that I have seen some people mention to me.
Yeah, and actually, that was a something that someone brought up in the chat right as you began to mention it. So
Convenience.
definitely a rather convenient coincidence there, but it definitely is worth watching, at least on a local level. But just because that's a local event that could happen with a storm, that does not mean that that's going to be the only impact. Obviously, it's still going to be a rather significant tropical cyclone, whether it be a tropical storm or a hurricane. It really won't matter when it comes to the overall effects. Um, I mean, winds obviously higher wind speeds generally means more damage, but if this storm manages to expand after its passage through Cuba, it might be able to push up a higher storm surge with the lower wind speed. So we have to uh, basically you just have to be very mindful of the predictions and of the forecasts. Uh, that way, in case things do end up changing rather quickly, you can be notified of it as soon as you possibly can.
And of course, we are awaiting to figure out whether the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, will make that the state of emergency, and that will, of course, help with some of the preparations that will need to go on in Florida in the event he does make that call and tropical storm watches are issued, because it is very, very likely that we will be seeing some of those continental U.S. watches get posted, especially during the late in the weekend. And that, of course, is the 4th of July, as it is on Sunday. So definitely got to be on the lookout for that. I'm really hoping that the holiday weekend does not distract away from the storm. It may be a few hundred miles away, but of course, as we know, this system is booking it at a much faster pace than we have seen with many systems that enter from the main development region into the Caribbean Sea. So, of course, this cannot be taken as something that's not going to be coming for several days. This is going to be coming during the first half of next week. So, really look on that. Of course, this is expected to slow down probably within the next 24 to 36 hours at best. So what happens then? It's all up to what happens with that land interaction. And unfortunately, there's really no good sides to both, considering the fact that if we look at a system that travels over Hispaniola, we know that Hispaniola economically is not exactly the best region that, to handle cyclones. We have seen multiple cyclones that have affected the Hispaniola region, where we see a lot of fatalities for sure, especially in Haiti, which really has to be concerned for the region, considering the fact we could be looking at a near or direct hit across the island there. And then, of course, we are looking at more islands in the path like Jamaica and then, of course, Cuba, that are also determined on whether this tracks over land or not. So if we don't see any land impacts and the structure of the system is not disrupted as heavily, that really has to be concerned, and that would really much make that HWRF, which has done a somewhat decent job with this so far, considering the fact they did have this intensifying quicker than all the other models, and it's exactly what it did. Elsa practically blew out almost all of the models in terms of the rate of intensification over the last 24 hours. Specifically from last night through this morning, when we saw it jump from 50 to 85 miles an hour in a matter of 12 hours. So, of course, rapid intensification is 35 and 24, so we definitely met the criteria for that, and that is for sure. And it's and I did some research earlier today. This would be the earliest hurricane in the season since 2012. So, something to look into that for.
I don't think that's very correct, Xavier.
20
Since 2014, I believe.
No, 2016. You had the Alex in January.
Oh yeah.
Well, oh yeah. Well, I think I was. Yeah, I forgot. Alex was. Yeah, 2016 and then 2012. Because Barrel was close, because that was July 8th, and then you had another one year that was July 6th. So.
Yeah, and in regards to similar, this, at least in regards to the date, this is giving me a lot of Hurricane Arthur vibes of 2014, because if I am remembering correctly, that formed roughly around the 4th of July holiday and made impacts around that time in the Carolinas as a Category 2.
Yeah, we had four. Yeah, it formed around the beginning of July, and then it pretty much started making the worst of the impacts. Really came around the 4th of July, which, of course, was a very unfortunate. And I mean, in terms, we're not looking at a tropical storm landfall in the U.S. during Independence Day this time. We're looking at tropical storm watches that will likely be posted around Independence Day. And given the fact that, of course, we were looking at people celebrating the holiday. The real question comes into how many people will actually heed these warnings, and how many people will actually listen and take the necessary precautions for this thing. Because, I mean, we're looking at. I mean, of course, holidays happen once per year. These cyclones also happen every year, but we're looking at something that I always say during U.S. Severe Streams. Your property is replaceable, but your life isn't. And, of course, we are looking at a very life-threatening situation if this does follow that path that we're looking at, especially as it tears through that Caribbean. I mean, you can see the wide swath of the Caribbean under warnings, all the way from the Antilles all the way into Cuba. You've got Jamaica, like pretty much a large swath in general. Really, the only Caribbean island right now that's not seeing any of it is pretty much the Bahamas and Puerto Rico. But Puerto Rico is still seeing impacts from the rainfall. So you're really not out of the woods on that, and even then the western Bahamas could still pick up some rain from this in general as well. So you're looking at almost the entire Caribbean being affected by Elsa in some way, which of course is not exactly good news, especially as we are only in early July.
Certainly. I mean, who would have expected a hurricane in pretty much the first day of June, no less. Or July, I'm sorry, no less. And quite a serious one, too. And like I said earlier, the last few times we've had storms, in this part of the world at least, that have been hurricane force, we've tended to have active, above normal seasons. Think some examples were the 1933 hurricane season and the 2005 hurricane season. Both had similar storms to the one we're looking at right now. So there's been a history of an active hurricane season when we've seen storms, especially as strong as Elsa, go on. So perhaps a sign of things to come here. This hurricane is. Regardless, I think it's a good time for everybody to go over their hurricane preparations and go over it as soon as they possibly can, especially for those in the cone, and either evacuate or assess the situation and see if you have to leave or if it's just out of the most dangerous part of the hurricane here. You're going to have to do that here really quickly for those of you guys in the cone because, like I said, this is booking it at 30 miles an hour. So your time is running thin here as you go on with time. So just please take this hurricane seriously, regardless of what it looks like right now. I know it doesn't look the best right now. It doesn't look like a classic hurricane you would see. And that is due, of course, mostly due to its forward movement, if I'm not mistaken, right, Devin? He's still here.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, that's basically everything. The storm's forward movement is dictating the structure of the, and yeah, it's making it a mess.
But yeah, there's just a whole lot of notables with this. For example, you have the fact that this does make landfall. The last hurricane to make landfall in Cuba in the month of July was actually Dennis 2005, which we have explained in previous stream as that it has been proven to be an analog track-wise with this thing. We also have the fact that because this did reach 85 miles an hour, it is the strongest July hurricane in the Eastern Caribbean since Emily of 2005. And then, of course, the fact that since 1900, the only Atlantic hurricane seasons that have had Eastern Caribbean hurricanes in June and July were 1926, 1933, 1961, 96, 2005, 2020, and of course now 2021. Now, a thing about all these years, 26, 33, 61, 96, 2005, and 2020, they were all classified as extremely active Atlantic hurricane seasons based on the NOAA seasonal hurricane definition, and that of course usually means you have somewhere around 160 ACE, and of course ACE is a measure of the storm's intensity throughout the year. Of course, last year we ended up having somewhere near 180. So, unfortunately, we're looking at a pretty active year, especially based on those climatology experiences with that. And then, of course, with the fact that this also reached hurricane strength at 59.8 degrees west officially, this is also the farthest east that a hurricane has formed this early in the calendar year since 1933. And it really hurts to be saying all these significant years. I've said 1933, 2005, 2020, and I'm sure no one wants to be thinking of those years. No one wants flashbacks, or no one wants to even think about looking at all the damage that occurred on all of those years, because of course we were looking at very significant seasons, and of course we here at Force 13, we definitely do not want repeats of any of those years, but unfortunately we are looking at something that will be extremely active. We just don't know in what way. This Elsa is just basically the first hint, the first clue as to what we could be seeing this season, and unfortunately I think the team can agree with me. They're not good signs at all.
I could definitely agree there.
This is a look at the storm on water vapor imagery here over the past few hours. You can see from it before making landfall over the Lesser Antilles there to its current status now. You get to see just how fast this storm has moved. Less than the past 24 hours here. This loop is not a 2 day. This is not a 2 day, 3 day loop. This is pretty much half of all today of what Hurricane Elsa has done here. And you can see it zooming to the northwest at 30 miles per hour in this last update. So it's, like we said, booking it. So this is just a wider look at things of what its current environment is like and just the area surrounding it here. If anybody was curious on just seeing a wide perspective of things.
Yeah, I mean, I was watching the timestamps of those frames, and that's a 16-hour loop. That's not even a full day, and look how far it's moved. Usually, we see tropical cyclones move that far in a day, or generally more than that, maybe 36 hours, not 16. So it's normally when you see a tropical cyclone this far away from land, you normally have 2 or 3 days to prepare. Some areas have as little as 36 hours. So it's very important that anybody who is under these tropical storm or hurricane watches and warnings are taking all the necessary precautions, because they really do not have as much time as they normally would for a tropical cyclone in this location.
Exactly. I mean, if you were to show me this loop here with no context, with no date in the bottom, I would have told you this is probably like a 2 3 day loop of a random tropical cyclone of the Atlantic, not a 16-hour satellite loop of a hurricane in the Caribbean here. So quite the sight here, and we cannot stress enough just how dangerous and how unexpected, really, in terms of its record-breaking nature, this storm is right now.
Absolutely not. And just as another quick statistic, it's not too much of a very, I guess, scientific statistic, but the cone that the NHC released, uh,
Yeah.
the overall path length of that cone is around about 2,000 miles that
Wow.
they're expecting it to travel in 5 days. So, so if you average it out, they're expecting the average speed of the storm to be about 17 miles an hour throughout the entirety of the 5 day cone, uh, of which most of that travel will be done in the next 2 to 3 days. Just figured I'd throw that out there as another way to really drive home that this storm, you really don't have as much time to prepare for it as you think you do. You need to be preparing for it now, especially if you are in any of the Greater Antilles.
And of course, while we are wanting your opinions too, we all know that some of you guys are definitely in the path of Elsa. So if you have any questions, feel free to give a mention to us at our live chat. You can do that by going at and then putting our Force 13 tag on there. That will put our name in orange, and you can put whatever question you would like us to answer. And of course, we will try to get to those questions as we head into the second hour of this live session on Elsa.
All right. So I've got two questions here that I want to hit right off the bat, because there's one question here that keeps on coming up around and around and around. And then there's actually a more interesting question that I do want to answer because it does get a little technical. So the first question that came through here that a ton of people have asked: is this storm going to be a major hurricane? Is this storm going to be a major hurricane? Is this storm going to be a major hurricane? The Quite frank, the answer is it's definitely possible for the storm to reach a major hurricane. I don't think that the ceiling of the storm is much higher than Category 3. Category 3 is definitely on the very high end of intensity guidance at this time. It cannot be ruled out, but I don't think that's certainly the most likely scenario. Some strings will need to be pulled in order for it to get to Category 3 in my mind. So, what I could tell you is also don't focus on the categories themselves because they're arbitrary and they're not important. Focus on what impacts are going to be coming to you as an aggregate. The water impacts of a hurricane can be just as devastating, if not more devastating, than the wind impacts. And we've seen that time and time again with many, many storms. And this storm is definitely going to be no different, expected to bring localized 15 plus inches of rain to both Haiti and Cuba if the storm passes over them. So the winds definitely they might not even be the largest threat with this storm. So category 3, I would not fixate on that number. The next one that I want to get to is that someone ended up asking, Bill had a pressure of 987 millibars with 60 miles an hour. Yet this storm has a pressure of 991 millibars and is 85 miles an hour. How does that work? Well, this actually does verify as well with a algorithm that we have that's called the Courtney-Naff-Zare wind pressure relationship. It's usually abbreviated CKZ. And that takes a whole bunch of things into effect because, believe it or not, there's much more that goes into deciding what the pressure of the storm is than just the winds. You've got to consider what the pressure outside of the storm is, how large the storm is itself, how fast the storm is moving, and believe it or not, how far north it is. Because if it's further north, the Coriolis force is acting harder on it. So that's actually going to make it easier to create a storm with stronger winds. So Bill has a deeper pressure here of 987 with 60 millibars. That was a storm that was moving pretty similarly to this storm, but it was very far north. And that factor right there basically drops the bottom out of the pressure requirement. So you could see a 60-mile-an-hour storm, but pressure's 987. That sounds deep, that sounds impressive, but it's only 60 miles an hour. That's perfectly reasonable. This storm, very far south, 13 degrees north, very close to the equator, typically. And this storm is moving very, very fast. Forward speed, 30 miles an hour. So it doesn't require as deep of a pressure, anywhere near as deep of a pressure, to get winds of hurricane strength. And that's why we're seeing this storm here with a pressure that is 4 millibars less than Bill, but it's producing winds that are 20, 25 miles an hour stronger. Anyways, what's the next question we got?
I see one that could be also up your alley, Devin. Why does it seem like the Elsa has been weakening and strengthening and almost in a cyclic pattern?
Oh, well, that basically has to do with the storm. That has a lot to do with the storm's forward speed. So this storm hasn't really been able to get a clear consensus central core made. And that's because the storm's moving so fast relative to the atmosphere itself, it's actually creating its own wind shear. So that wind shear, the storm's really struggling to get it together against the own wind shear that it's inducing upon itself. And that's the reason why we're seeing this storm kind of go up and down, fluctuating intensity. Storms that typically have a shear pattern do this quite a bit.
It looks like there's an interesting thing going on with Elsa right now. It looks like we have a new hot tower with cloud tops up to minus 80. So
Okay.
that's going to be interesting to see what happens with that one.
Anyways,
Which quadrant would that be in? Just out of curiosity.
The northern.
I'm just browsing here for questions. It doesn't light up for me because I'm not on the Force 13 tag. How
Yeah, give me a second.
much? Okay, someone's asking about impacts in Tampa Bay. It's too early to tell about that. Last season was a supercharged year for a hurricane season. Is this a possible repeat? More and more likely that it's coming out to be yes, considering that a very good analog for this year is 2004. That was a hyperactive season. Another indication that 2004 is an analog has been the very anomalously active South Atlantic. 2004 also had that. So considering that 2004 was a very active season, and this season seems like it's going to be similar to 2004, unfortunately, we could definitely see another hyperactive year.
Yeah.
I'm trying to see what else we got here.
And of course, for those that aren't too familiar with hurricane seasons and are pretty much joining us as someone who just wants to know what's going on, 2004 was a very destructive and pretty much very deadly year as well. We saw 4 hurricanes that hit Florida alone during the span of the month. We really had over $60 billion of damage in 2004 dollars. Of course, given the inflation and the fact it's been 17 years, that would be worth a lot more in 2021 USD. But we're looking at a season that could pretty much resemble that. Of course, 2004, their first storm did not form until the end of July. So we're pretty much looking at a prequel of what could potentially be something that lines up as to what 2004 did. And of course, we're looking at what will probably be the first of what could be several landfalls across the southeast or Gulf Coast or southeast U.S. in general. So um, we've always been saying in our hurricane season forecast that Florida and southeast looks to be a big player in this year's hurricane season, and it really does not look like that philosophy has changed much at all.
So moving on with questions, someone's asking, is it weakening now or strengthening? And what will the potential impacts be in Jeremy in Haiti? The answer to those is pretty much a package deal. One, the most recent reconnaissance passes did show that the pressure was falling in this storm, but previous to that, this storm was definitely weakening. It is possible that this storm is getting its act back together. But what we do know is that the low-level center of the storm is currently not entirely covered by the tallest cloud tops, which is something that you would want to see. Now, there's a recent convective burst that'll probably going to change that, and that could bring the storm back on the upswing. But as of right now, it doesn't seem like right now. I would say it's probably holding intensity. As far as impacts in Haiti are concerned, that you're going to have to worry about definitely some high winds, definitely hurricane force winds, especially if you're in the landfall area, which we don't 100% know where that's going to be. Because even though this storm is only 24 hours away from landfall, that is actually still quite a bit of a way out. So we don't know exactly when where this storm rather will make landfall in Haiti, if it even does. But impacts very heavy rain, flash flooding, mudslides, and definitely some decent winds. Prepare for hurricane force winds. I don't think storm surge is going to be a huge factor, but definitely I would say 1 to 2 meters at most. I don't think it's going to be much more than that. I wouldn't think it would be much more than that. Let's see here.
Yeah, last one I'll throw toward you,
Yep.
Devin. I'm assuming you were just transitioning to a question. If you weren't, my apologies.
No, that's fine. Go ahead. Go ahead.
One of the I mean, this is probably we probably already said this before, but I figured I'd throw this out here. If the mid-level center and the low-level center were to get realigned, would this begin to rapidly intensify, or just intensify in general?
Well, in order for that to happen, it would need to stop moving so fast. Yes, if the storm gets stacked, there's nothing stopping it from intensifying very quickly. But this storm is struggling to remain stacked because it's moving so fast. So I wouldn't expect it to get stacked anytime soon. So yeah, I don't think rapid intensification is on the cards quite yet. The next comment that I have here, will this storm slow down? Yes, it will. It's going to start slowing down in about 12 hours, and once it starts slowing down, it can definitely consolidate a little bit, as the HWRF has it intensifying just to the south of Cuba. So, yes, the storm is going to slow down. It's not going to be going 30 miles an hour its entire time, and we actually mentioned that the 5-day average speed is about 17 miles an hour. Moving 30 miles an hour now. In order to get that average speed down to 17, it's got to be moving way slower towards the end. So absolutely going to be slowing down. Let's see what else we've got here. Is Elsa going to hit Florida as a hurricane or a major hurricane? Way too early to tell. Could this storm cause mudslides in many places across the Caribbean, such as Cuba? Absolutely. Would 1933 be a good analog for 2021? I'm gonna have to defer that to someone else. I don't really know analogs too well.
So 1933 is regarded as the one season above 2005 in terms of accumulated cyclone energy. In terms of that season, of course, there is one comparison we've already drawn to 1933 so far, and that was the fact that Elsa is the earliest Eastern Caribbean system, or pretty much earliest hurricane in this location since one of the systems in 1933, and that was specifically Hurricane 2. So we are looking at some of the similar cases that we did see with 1933. Of course, it's more active. We are outpacing 1933 at the moment because, of course, 2 was active at this time, at this point. We really
We're on 5.
Yes, and we are number 5 now. We were pretty much beating every year at this point, so it really shouldn't be coming as a surprise. But with that year, what we really saw was a very active Gulf of Mexico season, a very active southeast. Well, we got not many storms affected the southeast, so I wouldn't exactly necessarily say 1933 is a good analog activity-wise. In terms of what we could see, that is a possibility, but in terms of it actually being a decent analog, I really don't think that I would support 1933 being a good analog for this season at this time, mainly because of the fact that you saw a lot of the systems making landfall in Mexico or the Bahamas as the main areas, as well as Jamaica. So I really wouldn't say that is, especially considering the fact that, of course, 1933, we don't have all the records from that, as the fact we did not have satellite back then. So, of course, there is the chance that there were storms that were missed. And as some of you may know, there was 20 total storms, 11 of which became hurricanes, and 6 that did become majors. So we could be looking at something around that ratio, just a little bit more on the heavy side of tropical storms, given the fact, of course, we already have had 4 tropical storms previously to Elsa. But it's definitely something that we do need to watch in the coming months. But as of right now, I really don't think that 1933 would be the best analog to appropriate 2021.
All right, so going through some more questions. I'll be in the cone in South Carolina as I'm on vacation, although it's only going to be a depression. Will there be a flooding threat? I wouldn't count on it being only a depression, and I definitely wouldn't call any storm only a depression. One thing I can tell you is that it's not a guarantee that this is going to go into the Gulf of Mexico. We mentioned this earlier, and this will actually hit up another point. Will this end up hitting Florida? If this thing makes landfall in Hispaniola and gets pulled east, it'll go east of Florida. So, it's not even a guarantee that it's going to go into the Gulf of Mexico and then hit Florida and then weaken over South Carolina. Basically, there's too much uncertainty at this point in time. Once this storm passes Hispaniola, we're going to have a much better idea on what this storm is going to do.
Yeah, and even then, South Carolina, in terms of the cone, there is no tropical depression point at this time. So
No.
I honestly am kind of unsure where you're getting the tropical depression part from. Maybe from models and all.
Well, it's because they're in the cone, but it's after the tropical storm and it's at minimum tropical storm strength. So.
Yeah. Well, of course, we have those two distinct scenarios. Of course, we have the scenario where it goes west of Florida, and then we have the scenario where it goes east of Florida. I mean, I think it's becoming a little bit more clear that the southeast in general is going to be seeing impacts. It's just hard to confine where and what impacts they will be receiving, because of course if we have that system go west of Florida, then we're looking at a landfall somewhere around the Panhandle, and then of course those rainfall impacts from the remnants driving northward into the Mid-Atlantic and as well as the New England area. In terms of what happens if it takes that eastern track, if it does not go out to sea, although there are like a model or so that does try to do that, the consensus is not, however, that. But if it does take that closer approach to the east coast, then we're looking at a much more widespread threat, where we're seeing eastern Florida, the Carolinas, even Georgia, as well as parts of the Mid-Atlantic that could be seeing tropical storm force winds from this. And then, of course, you also got that rainfall pushing inland even further as well. So we're looking at a much more widespread scenario if this does end up taking that eastern route. And really, we're not looking at any good scenario either way. We're looking at either a potentially stronger storm if it goes into the Gulf of Mexico, or we're looking at a much more widespread solution if it does take that east coast route.
Yeah, and in regards to the Georgia solution, if it goes west there, the main threat, if it were to go there, just looking at models, it would be mostly southern. However, I am looking at this because a lot of storms that go through Florida, they tend to keep themselves in south central Georgia. I know I'm really focusing in on my state. I'm sorry. But there is something that I'm noticing is that it'll be a bit further north, and that'll mean that Athens might be in that if it were to take that western track, and that is a big college town. Of course, it is too far to say anything else in regards to specifics besides that, but I thought it'd be interesting because it's very rarely that storms go that far north whenever they impact the state.
Gotcha. All right, so moving on to next questions here. Crouch Spasm asks, could this become an annular hurricane? Right now, if anything, this is going to develop a pinhole type of eye. This wouldn't become an annular type system, I wouldn't think. Especially in this area of the Caribbean. You very typically don't see annular hurricanes. That's more of an open East Atlantic and West Pacific and East Pacific type of thing. You really need open water for annulars. So I would definitely say that's not going to happen. I don't even think it'll get strong enough to be considered for that. Is the storm looking like it'll be strengthening or weakening? It should be on a gradual strengthening trend as it continues off to the north and west, but for right now, it's going to stay rather weak, comparatively, to say the least. Let's see if, what else we've got going on here because I kind of missed a lot. Let's see what we've got here. Is Florida going to get hit? I think that we pretty much covered that one. The answer is it's likely, but it's not guaranteed. The impacts for the east coast of Florida are limited at this time. There we go. Is it possible it could become a Category 2 hurricane? We're currently forecasting that. So I think there's a very good probability of it doing that. Could this storm affect Mississippi? And if it does, could it be a major landfall? Affect Mississippi. Mississippi will. I don't know, not will, but if the storm enters the Gulf of Mexico, Mississippi will likely see at the very least rip currents, beach erosion, probably a little bit of rain. But this time it looks like that Mississippi is going to be very far to the west of the storm. So I don't think there's going to be a ton of direct impacts, but it is too far out to necessarily put a guarantee on that. Could Elsa relocate its center east where there's more convection, and how could that change the track? Well, it would have to kill off its center that's currently got hurricane force winds and a pressure under 1,000 millibars. So I would think that that's probably unlikely. We'll have to see how that goes out, but with the as strong of a center this storm currently has, I don't think that'll happen. If anything, it'll just get pulled back into the convection rather than relocated like something that Isaias did. Have a major hurricane hit Cuba in July before? Dennis of 2005 immediately comes to mind. I don't know if any other storm has done that, but Dennis of 2005.
Very few have done that.
Yeah, there you go. Hurricane Alma did it in June. There you go. So, there you go, pretty much. Will it affect the Bahamas? It depends on where you are in the Bahamas, really. But it seems like Bahamas impacts are going to be really limited because if this storm does track over the Bahamas, that means it would have gotten disheveled over Hispaniola. So I wouldn't expect too significant of impacts in the Bahamas. Is it guaranteed that it will hit Cuba? No, it actually isn't. Because it could get pulled completely north of it by Hispaniola. Not guaranteed that it'll hit Cuba. But it is very likely. Do you think that the storm will weaken back to tropical storm or strengthen a major hurricane status? Weaken to tropical storm. I don't think it's going to go down that far. That time of it to weaken down to tropical storm, I believe, is past. Strengthen a major hurricane status. That's a wild card at this point. We've already gone over that. I would give it 20-30% chance tops. Is 2017 a good analog? Unfortunately, yes. If I remember correctly, 2018, 2004, and 2017 are the best analogs. I don't really like discussing 2017 a lot for obvious reasons. It was a very destructive year. Hopefully, that doesn't verify. Would this be sort of similar to Ada? This storm's not going to be any similar to Ada whatsoever. Just No.
Eta was a Category 4 that struck Nicaragua. This is a storm that is affecting the much more north than that. Nicaragua is not seeing any impacts from this.
No.
And Eta, of course, I'm not sure if you're referring to the Florida portion of Eta's track, because we all know that Eta had a very erratic track. After passing Nicaragua, it did go through Cuba as a tropical storm before also going into Florida twice, both as tropical storms. This is not going to be one of those systems that takes an erratic track. This is a pretty, in terms of systems that you typically see, this is pretty straightforward. You usually see storms in the Caribbean that take some kind of curve at this time of year, whether it's to the northwest or you see one that takes it to the north and the northeast, somewhere along those lines. So we're looking at what is typically a normal track for the Caribbean. It's just much earlier than normal, and we would wish to expect. But in terms of Florida impacts, we're looking at something that's pretty much going to be straightforward, just a system that is coming from the south, and then pretty much it will affect the region however it affects the region. Because, of course, we're still unsure of how Florida will come into play, whether it's going to be with the panhandle that we will see the worst of the impacts, or whether it's going to be parts of South Florida and Eastern Florida that see the worst of the impacts. It's still too soon to confine those details, and that's why the National Hurricane Center hasn't really highlighted the impacts, because there's just a very wide scenario of possibilities that could play out. So I really would think that if you're in Florida, the eastern Gulf Coast, the southeast, I would really make sure that you are monitoring this system. Even up into parts of even Virginia, the Delmarva, maybe you could even be monitoring that. But of course, we're still way too far out to determine impacts there. But really, we're just looking to see what will happen as it passes through those very pivotal areas like Hispaniola. That will really give us a much better idea as to where this will go. And of course, we will be keeping up with lives across the weekend, as well as the early of next week. So we will bring you the latest when we do get a better forecast idea, obviously. We're not going to go anywhere else. We will stick to covering this storm as long as it remains as much as a threat is, which it is likely to stay that way for the next several days. So as much as the last several systems, we're not looking at something like that this time.
All right. So, next one I'm going to knock out here real quick. Do you think that the storm will develop a well-defined eye? Well, if it becomes a Category 2 hurricane, that is usually a prerequisite. Did this storm meet rapid intensification as it tracked over Barbados? No. In order for a storm to be classified for rapid intensification, it needs to strengthen at least 1 knot per hour and sustain it for at least 24 hours. The storm did not do that. It did not meet a rapid intensification threshold. You guys,
Sorry, Devon, but it did.
it
I
didn't
believe that according to NHC advisories, it did more than 30 knots in 24 hours.
It did 30 knots in 24 hours?
Yeah. I think it was actually 35 at maximum.
All right, so never mind on that. Okay, so apparently it did 35 knots in
30 to 35, yeah.
because it was 55 knots before it started intensifying, then it went up to 75. Okay, sure, I guess. But the National Hurricane Center also had the storm really low before Recon took it through, like AMS.
That is true. And the rapid
AMSR2 had 55 knots. So
it might be taken out in the TCR.
Yeah. So we'll see on that. But I'm sorry, I'm going off of the 55 knots at 6Z by AMSR2, and by that definition, it did not do that. So I'm thinking of something unofficial. That's entirely my bad. So yes, it is rapid intensification. 30 knots in 24 hours will do it. Is this going to hit the Dominican Republic? Not a guarantee. Probably not likely. It seems more likely it's going to hit Haiti if it hits Hispaniola.
Devon?
Yeah?
Would you be able to go through the recon schedule for tomorrow?
Yeah, we could do that. I'm just trying to... The questions are coming up so quick, and I'm trying to hit everyone. I'm sorry if I ended up missing anyone's question. I really tried my best to get through everything that I could. But yeah, we'll go through recon real quick. So the first recon mission for tomorrow, it looks like that we're going to get our first recon at about 11 UTC. So that would be about 7 a.m. Eastern. That's going to be an Air Force 3 mission. They'll be in the storm. They're expected to be in the storm for actually quite a while, over 6 hours. So we'll probably get plenty of passes from that mission. They'll be in there from roughly, at least the plan right now, of being there from roughly 7 a.m. to almost 2 p.m. So we'll see if that ends up continuing. After that, we've got plenty of reconnaissance missions for you tomorrow. After that one, we've got NOAA 42 flying in. That should be there about noon Eastern, staying in the storm for about 5 hours. We'll get plenty of fixes from that. We do have an upper level reconnaissance mission from NOAA 9 scheduled, so that'll be also in there. The next one after that, it looks like that there will be a plane within the storm at about 6 p.m. tomorrow Eastern. And that's going to be an Air Force plane. And then flight number 4 will be another NOAA 2 craft. That'll be taken off. That'll be taken off rather early, and that's expected to be in the storm at 7 a.m. again. So that's basically the recon schedule for the next 24 hours. So we should expect to see 5 planes in the storm in the next 24 hours. So we definitely got a packed schedule here.
Yeah, for sure. Alright, I'm going to try to get to some of the other questions that we have just gotten over the last few weeks. We had more questions. We just answered that question about whether it was going to hit the Dominican Republic. Not guaranteed.
Yep.
In terms of other things, one of the question is Irma a good comparison? Definitely not. Irma,
Nope.
of course, formed in the Eastern Atlantic and became a 180 mile an hour Category 5 and sustained that for quite an impressive time. This did not form in the far Eastern Atlantic, nor will it become a Category 5. And of course, this is not taking anywhere close of a path that Irma did. So Irma is definitely not a good comparison in the slightest. Another one, can there be other storms this year to be on Elsa's track, although stronger with better conditions?
We've got waves coming behind Elsa. I don't know if they'll be stronger with better conditions, but we have at least another 2 tropical waves coming behind Elsa with non-zero formation chances. So we'll have more information on that in the future. I think one of them is marked as 10 or 20%.
We have it at the last I checked. We think I still have it at 10% for right now.
Yeah, that's about right.
The next question, not counting the northeastern part of Superstorm Sandy, but of course, but this sounds somewhat similar to, is it possible that the first part of Sandy is a good analog? Definitely not either.
No.
Sandy formed in the Caribbean, and it rapidly...
Storm.
Yeah, Sandy was in October of all months.
Yep.
It also was almost a northerly storm for its entire duration. It was always gaining latitude. This is not the case with Elsa. This is a storm that's moving west, not north. And of course, we are not looking at impacts that will be going into the Bahamas as strong as what Sandy did. And of course, the entire second part of Sandy, that can just be written off as an analog, because that's definitely not going to be the case in the slightest.
Now, someone did actually bring up a good point. Is Charlie an analog to it? Well, 2004 is definitely an analog year, and what I could tell you is that Charlie was a very fast system moving through the southern Caribbean. That's going to be taking that took a pretty similar track to what's forecasted. What I could tell you is that this storm is forecasted to move to the north of most of this track through Charlie. It's been north of Charlie throughout its entire time, and the forecast is for it to remain north. So I don't think that it's going to have a chance like Charlie did to just quickly blow up. Well, let's hope not. But Charlie, probably not a bad comparison. I think the best comparison still to this point is probably going to be Dennis of 2005, as much as I don't like to say that, because that was a Cat 4 in the Caribbean that intensified in that channel. Because I don't think this is going to be a Cat 4. I honestly don't know if this is going to be a Cat 3, but it seems like Dennis is the most apt comparison at this time. Could this be like Laura? No. No. That's pretty simple. What will cause the storm to slow down? The high that's currently steering it, that's going to be sucked up to the north and east. That's going to ease the steering currents of the storm a little bit, and it's going to basically slow the westward movement of the system. So that's what's going to cause it to slow down. The steering currents are going to go down a little bit. Do you think this season will be 2004 in terms of getting a lot of low latitude systems? Yes. Kay, I believe you have strong opinions on that if you're here.
With regards to 2004, we obviously have to keep in our minds that that was an El Nino year. Although it was a Modoki El Nino, so it had very unusual effects on the Atlantic. It's
Suppressed
not.
the East Pacific, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it did, and left the West Pacific very active and the Atlantic hyperactive. But in terms of the Atlantic specifically, 2004 had a lot of long tracking storms originating in the MDR from tropical waves. It was a big wave season. A couple of them formed quite far south, such as Ivan, which holds records for greatest intensity at lowest latitude. We could certainly see a long tracking storm later on in the season that does the same thing as Elsa, but has better conditions and is much stronger as a result. Because if we were a month later and the trades were slower, Elsa would probably be a major right now, and potentially we'd be discussing Category 5 peaks as it moves
Yep.
into the West Caribbean, which is why it's very good that it's only July and the conditions aren't there for it to be that strong yet.
I mean, this could have blew up very similarly to Emily of 2005, where that kind of just quickly poofed to a Cat 5. So
It did, yes, but the trades were slightly lower. It wasn't moving as fast, and that made all the
yeah,
difference.
yeah, that the forward speed of this storm has really made all of the different. I mean, if this storm was moving slower, I mean, this thing probably wouldn't have even gone into the Caribbean because it would have gotten it would have gotten strong way further out to the east, and that would have recurved it sooner. So, that's typically what happens with storms that get strong that far east. But since this is moving so quickly, it's kind of struggled to do that. It's gotten pulled into the Caribbean. That's where we are now. Let's see here. Okay, now people are just trolling with the analogs. What's your forecast cone on Elsa? Can anyone throw up our forecast cone on the live stream?
If anybody has it, then you could put it in the output, and I'll screen share it.
Yeah, no,
Okay,
Ethan.
well, wait. I saw a question from a person earlier asking if there would be impacts in Mississippi, and
Yeah,
there's no model guidance that points to any impacts on Mississippi. So no, there are not.
I wouldn't say no impacts in Mississippi because
Well,
you're
currently
still
there's
gonna
no
have.
model guidance, but there
Well,
could be impacts, but not any that are known or now for any model guidance.
well, you still have beach erosion. You're still gonna have outer bands. You're still gonna have
Impacts as
minor
in
coastal flooding
hurricane
with beach
force
erosion.
winds is what I saw in the question.
Oh, hurricane force winds? That I don't think so.
I don't think so. I don't think it's quite possible. There's no model guidance that points towards that.
Yeah.
So I would say no on that question.
Do you think South Florida is an area of concern for this season? I'd say, considering the analogs, all of Florida is of concern this season. Let's see here.
I think I got the cone up. Please let me know if this is an out of date cone.
Let's see what you got here, Isaac. No, that's the most recent one.
Yep, that's the latest count. So as of right now, of course, this is as of the 0Z fix, the 8 p.m. Eastern fix, of course. The analyst will probably be making intermediate fix in the next 18 minutes. Of course, that will be also determining what happens with the National Hurricane Center. They still have this at 85 miles an hour, so we'll see what they go with then. But as of right now, we think this will maintain its intensity for the next 12 hours before it strengthens again somewhat again. And we could be looking at a Category 2 hurricane as it passes between Jamaica and Haiti, and then, of course, a Category 2 as it passes near Cuba. It should weaken some before it makes that Cuban landfall, and then we should have what could potentially be a hurricane landfall in Florida before it weakens to a tropical storm around Georgia. Of course, this is still a very uncertain forecast. This has a lot of room to change. Of course, we're still looking at a error margin that is still pretty above the norm of what we would see. So of course, those there in the any kind of the cone, because keep in mind the cone only highlights where the center of the storm could be. So that means impacts occur, of course, well outside the center, and really you could be seeing something that goes all the way east of Florida and goes north, and then of course you also have the western end where something happens and could potentially go into far western Florida or into Alabama. So that's also something you got to look into. You really have to look at the general tracks and intensity because it's big confusion that's going to change a lot. So this is something you got to monitor consistently. This is not something that you can do a one deal and assume that is what's going to happen. It has been for its entire life a very challenging storm to forecast in terms of its track and its intensity. So please do not focus entirely on the location and the intensity. Focus on pretty much what the models are representing, because if you are in any of the lines that models have been representing, because there's a widespread, this is the areas that you should really be watching this system for, because there's a wide swath of areas that could be seeing impacts from this already. I mean, of course, if you look at National Hurricane Center, this tropical storm force wind probabilities, they already extend all the way from pretty much the Gulf Coast south of the Mississippi-Alabama border all the way into parts of inland North Carolina and even extreme far southern central Virginia. So you've got a wide swath of areas that could be seeing impacts from this, millions upon millions of people. So it's really not something to take down lightly. This is something you really got to monitor as a whole.
Yeah, I looked at the numbers earlier, and there's at least 5 million people with a 10% or greater chance of receiving hurricane force winds, and well over 15 million with a chance of tropical storm conditions. And that's before you get to Florida.
It just highlights the fact of you really need to be watching the situation, because we have a high population, a high amount of land in general. That's in this, considering the fact that you've really got almost 70, at least 3/4 of the Caribbean in play here, at the very least. That will be seeing significant or possibly significant impacts from this between the rainfall, the wind, any kind of impacts, especially between mudslides that you typically see in the Caribbean. And of course, that problem, of course, is also Haiti. As I mentioned earlier in this stream, Haiti has been known to be an unfortunate event in terms unfortunate target in terms of cyclones. Of course, anytime a cyclone goes over Haiti, we typically see a unfortunate amount of fatalities from systems that pass over, and it's usually heartbreaking to see that. Of course, we're hoping that Haiti is prepared. We're hoping that Haiti can handle what's about to come, as well as the entire Caribbean in general. But of course, if you're looking at statistical averages, Haiti has taken hard beatings out of any category of cyclones. It's really a matter of not looking at the category of the cyclone. It's more looking at what you can do to prepare, make sure you're taking the necessary precautions, because of course the intensity forecast and the track forecast are still uncertain at this time.
All right, I'm going to. I'm kind of working double duty here because I'm working with the cyclone analyst to see what we're going to be doing. I'm pretty sure we're going to be holding our intensity of 80 miles an hour, 95 millibars, mainly because the storm was intensifying in the previous recon, and we just had a pretty big convective burst pop up to the north of the center of circulation. So that's what we're going to be pretty much doing there. In regards to more things, is it still strengthening? Considering we just had that massive convective burst, I would say that whatever strengthening trend it was on during the recon mission, I would say it's probably still on it. So that's why we are holding. Let's see here. Are you surprised that it formed past the sand from the sand in Africa? I assume that they're talking about the Saharan air layer with that. And it's not necessarily too surprising because it kind of moved. It was basically south of the Saharan air layer for the longest time, if I remember correctly. So I don't even think it was a factor.
Yeah, looking at the origins of this, it was really interesting in terms of its origins because, of course, we had what used to be Invest 95L. That looked like that could have developed, and then we just started noticing in the models that the wave behind it, which eventually would become 97L, that started to have much more model support, and then you had more models that would depict a more significant situation for the Caribbean. And that's why the National Hurricane Center finally designated it and gave it, of course, a chance of formation with the Invest tag of 97L. We know that 97L would then eventually become potential tropical cyclone 5, followed by TD5, and then, of course, what we now have as Hurricane Elsa. So it's definitely been a quick organizer, really, from the start. It had a little struggle for a day as it tried to figure out what it was doing, as it structured itself. In the main development region, and then of course we just saw what happened last night. Many of us woke up from, at least in the eastern time zone, many of us woke up to a hurricane from when we went to bed with a 50-mile-an-hour storm. So we really came in for a surprise this morning. We saw that this thing had definitely improved in terms of its structure. It looks like it's trying to go through another restructuring phase, and it's kind of common of what you see when you have a storm moving this ridiculously fast. I mean, of course, we are looking at one of the fastest systems that I've ever tracked in the main development region crossing over the Caribbean, because, of course, this is still moving at a quick clip of 30 miles an hour. Pretty much, to get an idea of how fast this is moving, pretty much think of driving an automobile, and that's on a normal, small road, and that's basically what you'd expect from Elsa right now. So you really are looking at a really quick storm from this. So, I mean, it's expected to slow, and as we mentioned, of course, several times during the stream as well, this is going to be slowing down. It's not going to slow down to a point where it stalls or anything, definitely not. But it's going to be slowing down to what is typically more normal of what you'd expect in the Caribbean.
Someone ended up asking if this season is going to feature a suppressed Eastern Pacific, very similar to 2004. I know that the Eastern Pacific is currently in a suppressive phase. That's why we've actually been so active in the Atlantic. That's why we've had Danny be able to form, and that's why we've had all these tropical waves that have had decent chances. Is that there is a suppressive wave currently in the East Pacific, and that's basically lowering the wind shear in the Atlantic. I would assume if that stays throughout the rest of the season, then yes, we'd be looking at back-to-back dead seasons in the East Pacific, which has happened before. Most notably, most recently, actually, 2003, 2004. So you can absolutely see back-to-back seasons that are dead in the East Pacific, and it wouldn't be surprising to me, considering the analogs for this year, if that ends up happening. Someone asked, will this storm impact all of Florida? I don't know about all of Florida. It's a little too early, but if it goes into the Gulf of Mexico, it will likely be impacting a very significant part of Florida. What's the fastest moving storm ever? That would be, if my memory recalls correctly, at least for hurricane strength storms, that would be the 1938 hurricane that ended up hitting Long Island, that was moving at 60 miles over 60 miles an hour. Not many storms have gone faster than that. Someone's got precipitation forecast.
Yes, Kay has pulled up the pivotal weather forecast for rainfall. This appears to be from the 18Z GFS run. And Kay, what are you seeing from this specific run?
currently the storm is down here, and you can see that the GFS is having issues in the near term. The rainfall isn't as heavy as it would be, although it's over sea, but it just shows that it's a bit weak. As we get to Haiti and Dominican Republic, there's an area of 110 millimeters over the coast of Dominican Republic.
Yep.
Areas sort of 70, 50 along the coast. And then in this mountainous region on the western Tiburon Peninsula, you've got amounts up to 128 millimeters. Now, if we go to the previous run and look at the same time frame, that's still there, but there's a lot more in Jamaica. And going back to 18Z, the rainfall in Jamaica is reduced because it's shifted more to the east. Whether that will happen, there is a significant amount of rainfall. This is equivalent to about a foot of rain, these darker oranges. So if any of that ends up overland, it's not good. Such as here in Cuba, where you've got approaching 16, 18 inches of rainfall over the mountainous regions of central Cuba. You get a lot of flooding from that, unfortunately.
Yep.
And as we move on to Florida, there's widespread half a foot or more just offshore. If we move up to a bit later, you can see that there are areas with 8 to 10 inches inland, but the majority of it stays offshore. If we change the region so we can actually see Florida, there's quite a bit just offshore of the Panhandle, and there's a fair amount in Georgia too. So you could definitely see some flooding in inland in Georgia, and perhaps even the Appalachian Mountains, as the storm rapidly accelerates off to the northeast after moving inland and weakening.
Yeah, that solution would pretty much pose a widespread. It's like what we see typically from storms and the remnants. They usually, of course, curve to the northeast, and that's exactly what we're seeing with this. And even remnants can produce the rainfall that can lead to flooding. While you may not see the winds farther inland, you can still see the rainfall, and we're still seeing rainfall amounts clearly of 2 to 3 inches plus, all the way from the Carolinas, all the way into Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, as well as southern New Jersey, and then even offshore of parts of New England too. So you've really got a wide
That's
swath.
actually onshore in Cape Cod with 4 inches falling.
Yeah, so you got Cape Cod saying 4 inches, so you got a widespread amount if this were to verify. So we're looking, regardless of what happens, I think what we're going to be seeing is rainfall that could potentially lead to flooding no matter what scenario happens, because either way, this is going to be covering to the northeast at some point. It's just a matter of when.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that looking at that rainfall, it's looking like it's wanting to dump at least a good 2 in. I'm just trying to look there. It's in that.
Oh, that's 6 inches for southwest Georgia.
No, I'm talking about northeast. Yeah, that's like.
Northeast is
around
3 to 4.
Athens. Around Athens, because that looks
3
like
to
it's
4.
3 to 4.
Yeah.
It's in that red to orange.
We move over to the HWRF, which is an alternative rainfall product. And it's generally more accurate. You can see there's a maximum rainfall total of 2 feet, which, if I've got my translations right, is well over 500 millimeters. Somewhere in the mountainous regions of Hispaniola or Cuba. It's very hard to see due to how zoomed out it is because of how fast the storm's moving. But there are amounts of, I've looked at it earlier, there is an amount of over 16 inches, so 1.5 feet here in southwest Haiti. There is another spike here in south Cuba, and there's another spike here in central Cuba, with the last spike happening here, just around the Florida Keys and the Everglades. Now, this only goes out to 5 days, and rainfall will still be happening at the end of this cone, so we can't rule out seeing 16 inches in the landfall area.
Yeah, keep in mind these rainfall forecasts only go out to a certain level, and of course it does not capture the full length of cyclones. And of course, in terms of this is only rainfall from this specific storm. This does not include anything that is precursor to this. It does not include any storms that, like, for example, your pop-up showers and storms in Florida. Florida is definitely home to many of those afternoon showers and storms that you see daily. So that does not include that. This is just purely from Elsa in general. So please keep that in mind. This does not include any of the other storms that you may see.
Oh yes, I was speaking to someone in Jacksonville, Florida earlier, which for those who aren't amazing on geography is around here. So within the rainfall area from Elsa. And they said they've been having thunderstorms all week and there's a bit of flooding going on already. So that doesn't bode well for landfall when that happens.
NHC
Yep.
advisories out.
We have the latest on the National Hurricane Center. This is the 11th advisory, if I am not mistaken. This is now down to 80 miles an hour, which is in agreement with our forecast. However, this does not mean this is the end of it. They are predicting re-strengthening by hour 24. It will be back up to 85 in their prediction. And then they will have it inland with the 65-mile-an-hour storm by hour 60. We're still waiting to get the latest cones and stuff, but the discussion has come out, but not the rest of the advisory. So, trying to just figure out what they're saying, it looks like they're saying that data from an Air Force Reserve Hurricane aircraft have indicated that Elsa has weakened slightly. The maximum 700 millibar wind speed measure was 75 knots. The highest SFMR service wind sample was 61 knots, and that was in the northeastern quadrant. The thing was, this was sampled outside of the strongest convection, so it's really only been lowered to 80 miles an hour, which is as a result.
Correct.
So as of right now, this is now moving at 25 knots to the west, which means it's still pretty quick. There's really little change to the track forecast from what I'm seeing. It looks like the European model has steadily shifted Elsa's track westward by about 1 degree of longitude each model cycle. Let's see. And I'm trying to read the advisory here at the same time because I'm looking at the same information that you guys are too.
Yeah.
And of course, it looks like Elsa is supposed to be no longer in the heart of Hispaniola. That's the latest solution from the European model. So that is, of course, news considering the fact the European has always been so adamant about slamming Elsa into the heart of Hispaniola and pretty much shredding it there. So that is a significant change from that.
Now, it should be noted in this discussion that National Hurricane Center is basically saying the exact same stuff that we're saying here. Like, we've got 70 knots, 995. That's exactly what we're going with. The initial motion hasn't really changed, and there isn't really much of a change of the cone till last time. There should be a slow but steady decrease in forward speed over the next 48 hours. The storm should slow down to be about 18, 19 miles an hour and then gradually turn northward. The new NHC forecast is essentially just a blend of GFS, the UK Met, and HWRF. As far as strengthening is concerned, it's noting that conditions are very good for strengthening. Possible interactions with land masses is the primary reason for not showing a more robust intensity forecast at this time because it could hit those land masses and weaken significantly. So that's why there is such a large uncertainty in the track. That's why the NHC is only forecasting 75 knots. And it does note here that if Elsa does end up threading the needle between Haiti, Jamaica, and Cuba, then subsequent intensity forecasts may have to be increased, similar to the much stronger HWRF, which is having the storm thread the needle between the three islands. Pretty much exactly what we're saying. If the storm's able to get right into that keyhole, it's going to be able to intensify stronger. But right now, the NHC keeping the forecast intensity conservative just in case of any land.
And an update to those watches and warnings. The hurricane warning remains in effect for the southern coast of Dominican Republic from Punta Palenque to the border with Haiti. There's also a hurricane warning for the southern portion of Haiti from Port-au-Prince to the southern border with the Dominican Republic. And there is a hurricane warning for the entire island of Jamaica. There's a tropical storm warning in effect for the coast of Haiti north of Port-au-Prince and the south coast of the Dominican Republic east of Punta Palenque to Cabo Engano. There's a hurricane watch that is in effect for the Cuban provinces of Camagüey, Granma, Guantanamo, Holguin, Las Tunas, and Santiago de Cuba. And then, of course, there's a tropical storm watch that is in effect for the north coast of the Dominican Republic from Cabo Engano to Bahia de Manzanillo. That also includes a tropical storm warning for Cayman Brac and Little Cayman. There really hasn't been much in terms of the hazard changes. They're still predicting a 4 to 6 feet storm surge for the southern coast of Cuba, 2 to 4 for the southern coast of Hispaniola, and 1 to 3 feet storm surge for Jamaica. And it still looks like there up to 15 inches of rain remains possible for sure. In terms of the cone, I don't know if that has been updated yet. They have updated that cone. It looks like the 12-hour now point takes it south of the Dominican Republic. No landfall is now anticipated for Haiti, which is not good news at all. They really much have it going in between, but there looks like there is a landfall for that little portion of Cuba where it sticks out on that southeastern end. And then, of course, they do curve it into Florida. Looks like it's now Central Florida that they now curve it into. And then, of course, they have it going back out to sea slightly, just very, very slightly, have it going back pretty much east of Georgia, paralleling it in a way, before a second landfall second continental U.S. landfall in South Carolina. Of course, a lot can still change. We're still looking at a cone that expands all the way from the Florida Panhandle and around the Pensacola area. And then, of course, they're in the eastern side of things. That would not be good at all. That it stays out to, in the water, and pretty much we could be seeing something that pretty much goes out to sea more, and potentially strikes even more of the eastern seaboard. So, we really do not hope that widespread impacts go out as far inland as that. But unfortunately, this is a double-wielded sword. We are looking at a situation that's not good for either side it takes. Where if it takes the western end. If it threads the needle, then we're looking at a really significant problem. So we really need to hope that land interaction help does stop this thing as much. It comes difficult to say because we don't want any of these storms making landfall. We don't want any of these storms making impacts because obviously it's not anyone's fault. This is just Mother Nature working its magic across its own separate ways, I guess. But regardless, that's why we're here. We're here to get you prepared for these. And of course, it's just a wait-and-see game as to what will happen. Will it thread the needle? We really don't know. It's really why we've been saying that the next 24 to 36 hours is so pivotal to the future of Elsa. And it will really give us a better understanding as to what will happen. So please stay tuned. If you're monitoring this system, keep monitoring. We will have a much better idea either by tomorrow night or by Sunday morning. So just keep this in mind. If you are in Hispaniola, if you're in Cuba, if you're in Jamaica, please make sure you're prepared. You guys are under warnings and watches at this point, and really, you need to have your hurricane plan ready to go, especially considering the fact that the Caribbean is no stranger to hurricanes, and of course we have seen severe impacts across the areas there, and especially with Haiti. Haiti has been proven to be a significant target with systems when they do cross. So we really gotta be looking out for them, keeping our prayers for them, keeping our minds on them, hoping that they do make this out of course, and that applies to the Antilles that just got hit as well, and as well as Barbados that also just got out of Elsa as well. So please keep them in your thoughts. This is not a system to joke around with. We know that the Elsa has been very controversial for its own reasons, but this is not a system to joke around with. This is a serious storm with serious effects, and therefore we really need to be looking at those serious effects. And that should be our primary focus with this system.
Yeah, and really you shouldn't be joking about anything in regards to whenever the concept of life is in harm's way. If people are in harm's way,
believe you cut out there, Ophelia. We're not getting you.
You weren't?
Yeah, we didn't get you there for about 30 seconds.
You stopped mid-sentence.
And we're still not getting Alferia.
Right, well, we'll continue to move on. Oh.
Am I okay now?
Yes.
Yes.
Alright, I got added to a random... Give me a second. Sorry, I need to start blocking people.
I saw a couple of comments in chat that I'd like to get to in a second.
Yeah, we'll get to those in a moment, Kay. Just go ahead, Alferia.
Joking with any tropical system when life and death is involved is something that I am not okay with. There's a difference when joking about a storm that's in the middle of nowhere and doesn't do anything besides spin up some water, and a system where lives are at risk of being changed forever. And so that's something that I think everybody really needs to understand. I know the majority of people who watch Force 13 understand this a lot and take this topic very seriously, but I know there is a decent there is some people that who still want to make fun of this, and I really just want to push it out there that please do not make a joke about this. I know that the storm name is haha, it's funny, but it really isn't when you consider the fact that people's lives are at risk.
All right. Go ahead, Kay. I assume we're going to start with the super chat.
Yes. We've had some not good support from a lot of people tonight, and we'd just like to thank everyone for their support. The money goes back into the project and allows us to provide better coverage and get more information to more people, and in the end, more people get helped. So we're really grateful for you allowing us to provide more coverage.
A 10-pound donation from Oceanic Water. We thank you very much for that donation. I'm sorry that it took us as long as it did to get around to the super chat, but thank you very much for the donation. We eventually got there. We just had a lot of important information to go over.
Yes.
But what other questions did you see, Kay?
Other stuff I saw has been some comments about Tampa, which is obviously near the landfall location.
Yeah. If it goes into the Gulf of Mexico, Tampa is pretty much right in the middle of the cone of uncertainty.
And
so
you'll probably get some surge there.
Definitely, storm surge is really bad in the St. Petersburg Bay. Storm surge basically gets funneled in there. It's a right angle, so geography really plays a bad role into making surge worse there than it normally would. If you get caught in the right front quadrant of the storm, surge can be pretty bad. Someone just asked if an eyewall replacement cycle is possible for this storm. There is no indication that there's a secondary eye wall forming, mainly because we haven't even gotten a primary eye wall to form yet. This storm became a hurricane without even a fully closed eye wall, and that's not necessarily uncommon either. Storms have done this. But this really, really struggled to close off an eye wall in the southwestern quadrant, and that's a small eye wall here too. We're talking an 8 to 10 mile radius of maximum winds. You're not going to get a secondary eye wall forming outside of that when you can't even get the first eye wall closed. So, no, eye wall replacement cycle is definitely not what is going on here. What's the expected surge in Cuba? I think we said 1 to 2 meters, right? Okay.
based on based on the latest National Hurricane Center discussion, they are looking at 4 to 6 feet, which would be 1 to 2 meters. Yeah. Cuba's in pretty much the bullseye for the storm surge, and then of course you also got those storm surge impacts possible for Jamaica and Hispaniola as well. Southern Hispaniola, I should specify.
Yeah, both Hispaniola and Cuba could be looking at up to 2 meters of surge from this. So absolutely, will it spawn tornadoes if it hits land? I don't know necessarily about Cuba, Hispaniola, or Jamaica, but if it goes over the United States, specifically over Florida, depending on the jet that's interacting with, yes, it absolutely can spawn tornadoes. We're way too far out to determine any sort of tornado risk that might happen with this storm. It doesn't seem like it's going to be as significant as it could be. Like, we're not looking at an Isaias situation here, at least I don't think.
Yeah,
I haven't seen any indication of like an Isaias type tornado outbreak.
Yeah, of course, Isaias was last year. That was a very fast moving system, and then of course we did have that tornado outbreak that did occur with the eastern side of that. I mean, I was in Isaias with myself, and I was under a tornado watch from it. So yeah, there was a pretty interesting tornado outbreak that came with Isaias. You typically don't see. It's not something you typically see with the Mid-Atlantic Northeast. Something like that we saw with that. And of course, it's really too early to say. The Storm Prediction Center will, of course, update with severe risk when we do get there. But as of right now, anything usually beyond day 3 is just too uncertain to predict, especially when it comes to severe weather, because you usually don't know how the jet interaction, how other criteria or environmental factors will come together to produce that severe event. So what we could be looking at, because from what I see, there's usually always some kind of marginal severe threat. It's just too early to predict where and when, because we're still trying to iron out the details of where this could impact the U.S. in, because it's pretty likely that we could be seeing impacts in the U.S. There's still a very small off chance shot that it doesn't, but regardless, the entire Florida panhandle, pretty much the entire state in general, parts of the eastern Gulf Coast as well as the southeast should be monitoring the situation closely, because we will get a better idea of what will happen in the next 24 to 36 hours. So really, in terms of U.S. impacts, for those who have questions about that, it's just pretty much going to be the same thing. We really don't have the best of ideas yet. It's all about what happens with that interaction with Hispaniola. That's really going to be key to determining what will happen with Elsa and what path and intensity it will take going forward.
All right. So going forward, someone asks, how strong will it be in the Dominican Republic? My grandmother lives there. I'm not quite sure if this will even make landfall in the Dominican Republic, but if it does make landfall in the Dominican Republic, we're looking at a hurricane making landfall there. I don't know if she lives in the northern part of the island or the southern part of the island, but obviously the southern part of the island will receive significantly worse impacts than the northern part. It kind of depends on where she is. Hispaniola is kind of a big place. Let's see here. I live in Fort Myers. If it goes to Tampa, we'd get bad weather since the bands would come from the strongest side, right? Too early to tell. We basically need to see if this storm even goes into the Gulf of Mexico. There's no guarantee that'll happen.
Yep, as we've mentioned several times, we are looking at it's two scenarios. It could go to the east of Florida. It could also go to the west of Florida. It's all kind of dependent on what happens in the next 24 hours. Yeah, Hispaniola is like the giant wild card of wild cards here with this.
Can Fred form in the next few weeks? Yes, it can. We currently have a 10% area of interest in the Atlantic that we're tracking. That has a non-0% chance of forming. So yeah, we could potentially see Fred within the next 5 days, but it is unlikely. Someone asked Cat 4 ? Most likely not. Another question about the storm surge, 1 to 2 meters in Cuba and Hispaniola. Let's see here. Will Cat 3 be a possibility? Absolutely. I would say at least a 1 in 4 chance. If it threads the needle, as the National Hurricane Center mentioned, between Cuba, Jamaica, and Hispaniola, we'll definitely be seeing. I think that we'll definitely be seeing at least a Cat 2 with that case, if not stronger.
And yeah,
Hispaniola, I've never heard of that island. That would be Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Will this become a tropical storm again soon? No. Is the eye visible yet? There is no eye with this storm. What is the worst quadrant of the storm? That's the southwest side. There's not even tropical storm force winds yet. Is it I don't even know about that. Okay. Could the blow up of convection east of the center do what it did last night? I assume you're asking basically if there's going to be another bout of rapid intensification. With this way that the storm is moving, I would consider that unlikely. The speed of the storm right now, I believe the NHC went with 29 miles an hour.
Yep, slightly lower from its 30 before.
Okay, 29 miles an hour. There you go. Let's see here. I think we're all caught up on questions for now. If I did miss it, I apologize. I'm trying to get through them the best that I can.
Well, we just got another question popped up. This was asking whether we will see more storms like Elsa this year. Well, considering the fact that this does form, considering this did form from a tropical wave, and the fact we've been seeing so many tropical or tropical waves that have been vigorous, especially for the June and July, not something you typically see, which really has been concerned for what we could be seeing. But we could be looking for much more waves that could develop into tropical cyclones. Some of them could be definitely strong as we do head into peak season, which is, of course, August and September. Something that we definitely need to watch in the coming months. And, of course, Caribbean cyclones become much more likely in the later parts of the season. And I mean, we had a lot of Caribbean storms last year. We had things like Nana that struck Belize. We had, of course, all those storms in the October-November timeframe between Delta. You had Gamma. You had Zeta even went into the
Iota. Zeta.
You had a lot of storms that went through the Caribbean.
Basically every storm down the stretch. Yeah. So yeah, there's. We're expecting the storm mode that Elsa formed from to be the preferred mode definitely for this season. So yeah, someone's at the pressure dropping. The last recon mission suggested the pressure is dropping, and considering we got a massive convective burst, we do believe the pressure is dropping. It's definitely strengthening a little bit. I think it briefly went down to minimal hurricane intensity, but I believe that it has gotten its intensity back. The NHC would certainly agree with us at this time. If it goes to the east coast of Florida, it's because it's weaker. Yes, the only way that this goes to the east of Florida is if it hits Hispaniola, and that'll dishevel it, and yes, it will definitely be weaker. Will there be any impact to Jacksonville? I would say definitely be ready for impacts from the storm in Jacksonville, at least tropical storm force conditions. I would definitely prepare for at least 5 inches of rain. I don't know if storm surge is going to be a huge part of this because this is a really small system. But yeah, I would definitely prepare for impacts in Jacksonville. But a direct hit from a hurricane seems unlikely.
Yeah, before we go to the next question, the National Hurricane Center does, of course, release storm surge graphics for the United States. So as they do get closer to finalizing what could possibly happen in Florida, or any parts of the Southeast, or any parts of the impact location in general, they will release those storm surge maps. They will give you an idea of the amount of surge you will be expecting. So just be on the lookout from that. The National Hurricane Center will eventually start releasing those storm surge maps for the U.S.
So is Florida going on a hurricane watch? I imagine watches will probably be put up tomorrow morning. Or will it be a little bit after that?
I think it's probably going to be some point probably during the afternoon or evening hours of tomorrow, and then if at the extreme latest by Sunday morning. But we will likely start seeing
the watches will I'm sure that the watches will be coming. We'll have to see.
Yeah, because we still got the rest of Cuba to get those watches, because there's only hurricane watches for the eastern half, and that's not even where the center is going to be passing yet. So we still got got a portion of Cuba to go before those watches continue to expand north. You can usually see how long it takes before you get a watch, because if you notice, there's always those watches that get put ahead of a storm, and then you can just watch them slowly crawl as you get closer to where you were originally in the cone. So of course we've been watching them expand across the Caribbean today. Tomorrow we're going to be seeing them going to Cuba. And then, of course, we should be seeing them also going into the Key West area, probably at first, southern Florida, and then we could probably see expansions to that later on. So it's definitely going to be an evolving situation. We're going to be seeing expansions that the National Hurricane Center tends to do as we get closer to the event.
So someone's asking what's the worst Southeast Florida can expect. I don't know if Southeast Florida is going to receive very significant impacts from this storm, but I would definitely prepare for tropical storm force conditions. If you're in a low-lying area close to the shore, I would definitely be worried about beach erosion, coastal flooding, because those things can absolutely happen with a storm like this. Let's see here. If it went further south, could it affect the Florida Panhandle? The Florida Panhandle is within the NHC cone at this time, so I would definitely prepare for impacts from this storm, potentially even hurricane impacts from this storm. So I would definitely keep a very close eye on this and really get your plans of action ready. Do you think it will hit Bahamas or Tampa? What most likely is your opinion? I would weight it. I'll phrase it like this. I'll weight 75% towards the Gulf of Mexico, 25% towards the Bahamas. I don't really think that it's going to get pulled north through Hispaniola. I think that it's strong enough that it shouldn't, but it is still possible that the island dishevels it. So I would give it about 75-25. Is the euro still showing nothing? Yeah. So let's see here. I'm trying to see what else we got going on. Why Atlantic Ocean gets more hurricanes? Not quite understanding the question on that. More hurricanes relative to what? If we're regarding previously, it's because of several climatological factors coming together.
And I do want to accentuate the fact that, of course, we are looking at people, of course, questioning where this will make landfall, will landfall where, and we've been talking about how landfalls will play a certain role, especially with Hispaniola and Cuba. But I really do want to stress with this the fact that, of course, landfalls are not where the impacts are solely located at. Impacts occur with landfalls, of course, always extend out from center. It does not need to make landfall for there not to be impacts. There's going to be impacts for a wide swath of regions, whether this makes landfall or whether it doesn't. So. It's all about how close it gets, and of course we're going to be seeing a pretty good wind field with this, despite it being small. Just because it's small does not mean the impacts aren't there. It doesn't mean it's confined to a very small area. This is still going to be providing impacts to millions upon millions, possibly. So this is really something you need to be watching closely. And of course, with us finally dwindling down, we will be ending this stream at past. And I would like to note that we will be providing more and more live coverage in the coming days. Nathan will be back tomorrow, hopefully, to continue this. Other than that, we will be regardless of what happens, we will continue to bring you coverage. And you can find that with our link, youtube.com/force13/live. After this stream, we will still have the automated streaming service. That is the other live stream that you can find on our channel. You can just click on our profile icon and you can see what is going on there. And of course, you can subscribe to us so you can find the latest updates. We will have more video updates covering Elsa. That way you get standalone individual updates that take around 5 to 6 minutes. It's a little more of a specific idea of what to expect, the forecast, the conditions that it's in, more so what we could expect. And then, of course, other aspects like our Twitter, you can find that at Force13. You can figure out what's going on there in terms of our graphics, like our cones that we release, our watches and warnings graphics, rainfall graphics that we will eventually be releasing as well. All sorts of graphics that provide the latest on this developing situation. So be on the lookout for that. We will also be covering this on our U.S. Twitter. Force13 US is also where you can find that information on. And then, of course, we also have our Facebook page if you want to look into that too. And really, you can also chat with us about it. We have our Discord server. You can join that by going into discord.gg/force13 spelled out. That link is at the bottom of your screen and will always be at the bottom of your screen during live coverage. So you can also look into that if you will, please. We are a growing server with over 2,000 members who do talk about the latest in the tropics. So please keep in mind that we will be providing the latest in a variety of ways. So there is going to be so many ways you can get the information on this system, as this will be remaining a threat for the next several days. So with that, anyone would like to pose any closing thoughts as we wrap up the stream?
This storm's moving very fast, and this storm's rather small. It's going to fluctuate in intensity over the next 24 hours. And Hispaniola, the interaction with Hispaniola, I should say, is going to determine the long-term track of where the storm's going to go afterwards.
Oh, I did just want to say this before we do close. It looks like Walter was very generous to make a rainfall graphic for this thing, so if someone can bring that up so we can go before we close out tonight's stream, that would be great. Just so we can close it off with the rainfall estimates that we're looking at currently. Of course, before I do go through these are of course subject to change depending on the track of this, where that center goes. So it's really all dependent on what does end up going on. Just waiting to see if anyone is available to live share. But in the event we don't, as of right now, here are, just pay attention if you are in any of these cities. This is for the Caribbean. We're looking at 88 millimeters of rain for Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic, 112 for Barahona, 22 for Port-au-Prince, 122 from Callao, 137 in Port Antonio, Jamaica, 50 for Manzanillo, Cuba, 23 for Guantanamo, 50 from Camagüey, 188 in Santa Clara, and it looks like our bullseye for the rainfall right now looks to be Sancti-Spiritus. That is 364 millimeters of rain. That is a significant amount, and of course, any amount over 100 millimeters for sure is definitely a significant amount of rain. And then, of course, Havana, Cuba, that is looking out for 64 millimeters of rain as well. So that is definitely something we will be watching for sure. This was made by our very own contributor, Walter UN. So thank you for making that, Walter, if you are there. And of course, we will be wrapping it up. So a large thank you to our team. This consisted of course, we're ending it with me, Isaac, Mike, Devin, Kay. Thank you to you all for sticking for these 3 hours of coverage, or 2.5, I should say. It's been a very important time. We are glad that we could get this information with you, and we will likely be going live within the early hours of tomorrow afternoon Eastern Time, probably around 18 or so Z. And we will be providing much more coverage as Elsa continues to bring significant impacts across the Caribbean. So until then, thank you all. We do hope you stay safe, and if you are in this path, please continue to watch your national official organizations. Keep in mind that they have all the information you'll need. Local weather offices, please keep in mind that as well. Of course, there's going to be changes to the forecast in the coming days as we get a better grip on this. So we really do hope that you are taking the necessary precautions if you are in the path of Elsa. Without ado, that's a thank you for our team, and then of course a thank you to our viewers for helping us get along. So with that, we will be ending it here. We will see you tomorrow for future live coverage.